Vous peignez des modèles nus aussi?
Des femmes, oui.
Pourquoi pas des hommes?
Je n'ai pas le droit.
Pourquoi?
Parce que je suis une femme.
C'est une question de pudeur?
C'est surtout une façon de nous empêcher de faire de la grande peinture. Sans notion de l'anatomie masculine, toute la gamme des grands sujets nous échappe.
Comment faites-vous?
Je le fais en secret. C'est toléré.
This is a scene from Céline Sciamma's 2019 film Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Given that this is my favorite film, I've dedicated some time to ponder over the themes, the characters, and the music and the scenes from it. But everything aside, it was this specific scene and what Naomi Merlan's character, Marianne, said about women artists and studying the nude model that got me thinking. Though a minor plotline and far from the core message of the film, I found it as a thought-provoking idea to dip into.
Name a female artist. A great female artist. Someone who is an equivalent to Michelangelo or Rembrandt or Raphael or Picasso or Matisse or Monet. Well, there are none. But don't get me wrong, there are so many amazing women artists like Mary Cassatt and Frida Kahlo. However, none of them quite measure up to the bar of greatness of these other born white, preferably middle class, and above all, male artists. We've been scratching our heads around the why.
Why have there been no great women artists? And if women really are equal to men, why have there never been any or so few of them? Is it because women are simply incapable of greatness? These questions pose as the mere tip of the iceberg. Below lies a deep, dark bulk of idées reçues on the nature of human abilities, human excellence, and the role of social order.
When I was young, the biggest compliment was that you could paint like a man, said Chabalala Self, a renowned contemporary artist. In 1989, the anonymous group of feminist artists called the Guerrilla Girls reported that less than 5% of the works in the Metropolitan Museum of Art were created by female artists. 23 years later, the group went back and did a recount, but found the numbers had barely changed. 1 in 10 of the current artists represented in Europe and North America are female. Moreover, art sales at auctions in 2008 to 2019 were 196.6 billion in total. Yet only 4 billion worth of the sold works were by women, which is only 2% of the total. Half of this 2% were pieces by just 5 artists. The male skew in the art world has a long history.
Everywhere we look in a museum, there's a sea of male faces staring back at us. Of course, mostly white and certain class too. They have been put on a pedestal of sorts, while women have always been seen as the footnote, the muse, the partner, the lover. But it is not that women lack this divine and mysterious force of genius that is somehow embedded in the person of the great artist, but it is that the systems in place institutionally have really colluded against women being able to be successful in the arts. A sparkling example of such institutional boundaries is the fact that they weren't really allowed to study the nude model.
From the 16th to 19th century, there was a significant gender imbalance present. The woman was second. She was meek, she was elegant, she knew how to do many things well, but she was never encouraged to be great at one thing. Unlike her male counterparts, seeking professional careers in the fine arts were restricted in their opportunities to receive an artistic education. She was excluded from receiving free training at the state-sponsored prestigious École des Beaux Let's Google Translate. Where are you translate?
École des Beaux-Arts.
She was excluded from receiving free training at the state-sponsored, prestigious École des Beaux-Arts until 1897. She was encouraged to marry, thus living with the responsibility of childcare. Making art was detrimental to her top priority as a mother.
And if she really wanted to make it in the arts or be involved in it in the first place, she would need to have been related to a man in the field. As Marie Bashkirtsev, a Ukrainian artist in the 19th century, put in her journal, "What I long for is the freedom of going about alone, of coming and going, of sitting in the seats of the Tuileries, and especially in the Luxembourg, of stopping and looking at the artistic shops, of entering churches and museums, of walking about the old streets at night. That's what I long for. And that's the freedom without which one cannot become a real artist." The freedom stripped from the woman limited how she, as an artist, could represent the world. She would have to tip the scales in favor of subjects that could be painted in the home, genre scenes, portraits, and still life paintings.
Perhaps this explains why women were able to compete and even become innovators on a far more equal field in the world of literature, in which the poet or novelist can work from the comfort of their own house. Of course, this oversimplifies the real difficulties involved in creating good or great literature, whether by a man or a woman. But it still gives a clue as to the possibility of the existence of an Emily Bronte or Emily Dickinson or Jane Austen, and the lack of counterparts in the visual arts until quite recently. Even if the women artist was really successful, there are issues with the legacy and longevity of their work, as some may erase her from the history books with the idea that her creations are not worth remembering. Of course, because she was a woman, and creativity in a woman was deemed as odd.
So we now have a vague picture of how society wished for women in the 16th to 19th century to act. It explains why we have seen so few women artists until recently. And whilst it already seems nearly impossible for a woman to make a career as a painter, for instance, this becomes even more impossible when they were prohibited from studying the nude model.
How is your arm so long?
I don't know.
In 1860, Marie Bracquemond, a promising young student of the celebrated painter Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, noted, "The severity of Monsieur Ingres frightened me, because he doubted the courage and perseverance of a woman in the field of painting. He would assign them to only the painting of flowers, of fruits, of still lifes, portraits, and genre scenes."
Though she was referring to her experience within Ingres's private Paris studio, her observations are a true reflection of the general limitations of women's artistic training throughout most of the 19th century. The period extending from the Renaissance until near the end of the 19th century was a period in which the study of the nude model was essential to the training of every young artist and an integral part of history painting. History painting was deemed as the highest category of painting. It was even argued that there could be no great painting with clothed figures. Really, no quote-unquote great art was not history painting. History painting was elevated, it was grand, and it was lucrative.
So it comes to no surprise when the mastery of human anatomy through the study of the live nude model was at the core of most painting programs. Groups of artists and their pupils often met privately for life drawing sessions. And whilst the female model was employed extensively, the female nude was forbidden in almost all public art schools until as late as 1850. A situation that art historian Nikolaus Pevsner states as hardly believable. Far more believable, unfortunately, was the complete unavailability of any nude models to the aspiring woman artist.
You guessed it. Studying it was denied to women because it was deemed inappropriate, unladylike, and even dangerous. It was only until the end of the 19th century that lady students were allowed to do so in England, of course with the model being partially draped, clothed with a pair of bathing drawers and a loincloth. And in Russia do we find women art students working freely from the female nude model, in the company of men to be sure. Helps a lot.
Without access to nude models, it was nearly impossible for female artists to produce important works of art. To be deprived of this cornerstone stage of training meant to be deprived of the possibility of creating major artworks, thus leaving oneself to be restricted to the minor fields of painting, for example, portraiture, landscape, and still life. It is as if a medical student was denied the chance to dissect or even examine the naked human body. It's not going to work out. It's also amusing how women are almost only put in the role of the nude model itself. She presents herself as a naked object for a group of men, which was low, of course, but tolerable. Yet it was forbidden for a woman to participate in the active study and recording of a naked as an object man or even fellow women.
An interesting example of such is pictured in a group portrait of the members of the Royal Academy in London in 1772. This is a painting of one of the live drawing sessions of two nude male models. Note that all the members are present except one. In fact, one very noteworthy, renowned, important individual. The single female member. Her name was Angelica Kaufman, and, for tradition's sake, is merely represented in the form of a portrait hanging on the wall. Sad, really, and quite amusing. Ah, yes, and we can't forget about this photograph. This is a photograph by Thomas Eakins in around 1885 showing a group of female students modeling from a cow, a bull, I don't know, an ox, but a naked cow to be sure. Perhaps a daring liberty at the time. The unavailability of the nude model for female art students is a perfect example of the automatic institutional discrimination against women. The simple act of forbidding them to study the human body caused a ripple effect outward, greatly impacting the landscape for women artists and how we perceive them today. This is, no doubt, one of the reasons why we see so little great women artists. It's because they can't study the nude.
Linda Nauckland's article, Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists, inspired much of this video essay. And to end, I'd like to quote her a little. The fault, dear brothers, lies not in our stars, our hormones, our menstrual cycles, or our empty internal spaces, but in our institutions and our education. Education understood to include everything that happens to us from the moment we enter this world of meaningful symbols, signs, and signals. The miracle is, in fact, that given the overwhelming odds against women, or blacks, that so many of both have managed to achieve so much sheer excellence. In those bailiwicks of white masculine prerogative like science, politics, or the arts.
It is not that women don't have the artistic genius to achieve greatness. The problem is in society and how it works against women. We can't change the problems of history, but we can definitely learn from it and tell the story more widely. It's true that women have often been hidden from history, from positions of power, from anything that enabled them to show an independent and creative voice. There is progress being made, slowly but surely. We still don't get to go to the museum and see Alice Neal next to Andy Warhol or Georgia O'Keeffe next to Picasso. So in that sense, we still have a long way to go.
Okay.
End.